A good day, everybody. Welcome to today's Naviant Solutions Spotlight on the topic of document packaging. My name is Guy Schrader. I am the Manager of Sales Engineering with Naviant. What is document packaging? Well, before I actually explain what it is a newer module that OnBase released officially with OnBase Foundation EP1. It had been released previously, but primarily just within the insurance industry. So if you are working on something prior to OnBase Foundation, we might be able to procure this depending upon how far back that you are, but absolutely it is available with EP1 and forward. So just a few highlights here. What really document packaging allows us to do is to be able to merge multiple different documents that are stored inside of OnBase into a single document, regardless of what the source file format might be. So we're talking images, PDFs, Word documents, electronic forms, so on and so forth. And ultimately, that renders what we call a document packet. And that packet is what can be distributed to any third party as we go through the process here. Now, this assembly of these documents can be triggered in a variety of different ways. Manually and via workflow, and based upon document type configuration or based upon any business logic that you might be. So think if you have a process where you might need to go ahead and generate this packet that can easily be configured. Otherwise, we'll allow users to ad hoc create those packets also. And once that packet has initially been put together, we do have the option to allow a user to edit and interact with those documents, that collection of documents, before we finalize and actually create that PDF document. And you'll see that through this demonstration here as we continue moving forward. So just a few more items here. Given there is a prerequisite, of course we have to have our documents in OnBase to make this work. If we don't have them in OnBase, how are we going to get them into a document packet? So stating the obvious here. And there's a couple of different ways that we can actually generate these document packets. First off, in an ad hoc fashion, you've retrieved a document, a user chooses to generate a packet. Very simple. It is completely ad hoc how we put that together. Given this could be invoked through a workflow action. You have a workflow process. There's a workflow action called generate packet that can go ahead and generate that as part of that business process that you might have configured. If you also just wanted to point out, and we're not going to really talk about this during the webinar beyond this point here, within OnBase Application Enabler, for those that are not in the know, Application Enabler really now gives you some capabilities to invoke OnBase in a variety of different ways from a variety of line of business applications. There is a context within Application Enabler that allows us to generate these document packets based upon the information that's on that line of business screen that you have up in front of you. So those are really the three major ways that you actually invoke the creation of these document packets. There is a concept of what's called a packet template that's available. And what that really allows us to do is, based upon keywords, OnBase can automatically construct a packet based upon the configuration of that template, bringing together the variety of different documents. And I'll show you how that actually works as we go through here. So there is that packet template, but there is also a non-templated option here, which allows a user to really completely ad hoc select the documents that they want to include within the packet. The system really does nothing for gathering those documents together, the user does, but ultimately that allows the user to create one large PDF of whatever they've flagged to be included within the document packet. So through all of this, as that packet's being created, there is an option through the configuration of the solution to create automatically a cover sheet for that particular packet. And we'll talk about that just a little bit later. There is that packaging interface that's available, and that's that second graphic that we saw before, where we allow a user to modify the packet contents before that packet is actually generated. That is an option. There may be some situations where you don't want your users to modify what the system would default generate that packet, what that file would actually look like. So again, one of those additional options. Ultimately, that final document packet is going to be rendered as a PDF. And from there, that's the document that you're going to be delivering, probably to a third party. But we also do archive that document inside of OnBase. So we always have that stored as an additional document. We never do anything with the original documents. Those source documents are going to be maintained inside of OnBase. Those are not removed in any form or fashion. But what we're talking about there is now that PDF rendition of all of those documents as a single document is going to be stored inside of OnBase. Excuse me. So again, that document packet generation interface is going to allow the user to view all of those documents that have been qualified, whether that's from a template or in an ad hoc fashion. And the source documents could be, as I mentioned before, Microsoft Word documents, images, emails, electronic forms, text documents, or even PDFs. And by the way, this all works inside of the Unity client or the web client, either or. The user can then select which documents that they want to be included within that packet, and then they're ultimately rendered as that single consolidated PDF document. So why might you need this? And some of you are probably already thinking that have some experience with OnBase. Well, can't I just use the send to functionality inside of OnBase to distribute those documents? By George, yes, you can. But the problem is when you use that send to functionality, it effectively handles each of the individual documents that you have as individual entities. So it's one document at a time, all things said and done. So what that means is if you have 10 documents that you want to distribute, that's going to effectively yield 10 separate files or attachments if you're using the send to mail recipient option. Which, when you're dealing with a large collection, think about the recipient's perspective. You know, here I have 10 different documents that are named in some form or fashion, depending upon how you have your OnBase solution configured, and not really organized, versus sending them one nicely consolidated PDF document with a table of contents and even potentially a cover letter that they can still just scroll through. So it does show things very nicely. Now, given when we use that send to functionality today, this is native capabilities inside of OnBase, those documents are distributed natively in the original file format. Given there are some conditional options to convert to PDF if you're dealing with a source file of a TIFF or an image file format. So again, further, why do you need this? If you have a business need to take that large collection of different documents that you have that are in your system, that are in different file formats, into a single document for distribution, that's just key. We're putting this all together that we can send that information out. And again, it can be organized via that template, or we do that manually, including a table of contents if we configure the solution to do that. And additionally, a cover letter, another option that's going to be generated via document composition. That gives us a lot of additional flexibility for what's going to be included as part of that cover letter. And ultimately, again, that document's going to be saved and indexed into OnBase as a PDF. All of those documents together as a single document. From an industry perspective, I'll let you take a look at this and you read things from your particular industry. There's different use cases for this all over the place. Rather than me focusing on any of those particular industries, I'm going to focus on that lower central panel for that cross-industry applications, because every organization has legal contracts. There may be a business need to put all that stuff together and distribute it. Your employee packets, if there's anything that needs to be distributed out to your employees that are made up of a variety of different documents that have come in over time, that's a great use for this. Auditing, if you have financial audits taking place, we see this every year, organizations that have some of their financial documents inside of OnBase. How can I easily distribute these documents out to the auditors as they're requesting? This is another great way of doing it, to go ahead and put together these packets and think shipping manifests, and there's a variety of other things that will cross all these different industries. So hopefully you're finding some potential use for this for your organization as we talk through this. All right, so let's get into some meat and potatoes. How does this work? For starters, I'm not going to get into all of the details of configuring the solution. I'm going to focus more so on the user interface to this, but there's a few things that we need to talk about behind the scenes for how this could be configured. As mentioned before, we can set this up using packet templates, or there's also some non-template options. So these are all the configuration items that we have to talk through for how you want this to actually work. When dealing with templates, think that this is going to be a repeatable process. This is the packet of information that I want to be distributing every time that I invoke this packet creation. There's a standard organization to what that packet looks like. Ultimately, the system is able to find all of these related documents based upon that trigger document. So somehow, some way, we're going to start this trigger by saying, let's create this packet. And we find those related documents by keyword, just like you do for cross-references and other things like that inside of OnBase. And there are options to, again, display that packet contents and allow a user to make modifications to that before actually generating that packet. Again, that's an option. We can turn that off if need be. From a non-template perspective, given that's where we're saying, I don't really have any idea what needs to go into this particular packet. So that really allows now the user to manually determine what goes into that particular packet in an ad hoc nature. The trigger document, where we started this from, will be included in that packet, but beyond that, the user is going to have to search and identify the different documents that are going to be included in that packet before it's finalized and generated as a PDF. So a few more things as we go through this. Going back to the templated piece, there's configuration items for all of these different pieces, and very quickly to talk this through, we have the primary document types. Where can I invoke this packet template from? What are the keywords that are going to pull all of these different documents together? There's options for whether I want to have the system automatically burn a header and a footer on all these pages relating to this entire packet that's going to be created. There's a concept of document sets, and that's effectively that organization of the packet. What documents are included, and what order do I want them to be included? As anywhere else inside of OnBase, there's going to be security considerations and other options that we need to talk about, as well as when we generate that packet, what document type are we going to archive that packet as, along with indexing of that information. So those are all some configuration items for those templates. When we're dealing with non-templated packets, really it's a switch. Do I want to enable the system, enable users to generate these non-templated packets on an ad hoc basis? Do I wish to include that table of contents or header and footers along with that? And there's also security specifically within there saying these are only the groups that are able to generate these non-templated packets. Okay. All right. So again, I mentioned before that this is all available inside of Unity or the web client with EP1 going forward. So before I actually show you a little bit of a demo, let's just talk through this. From an open document or a hit list, there's going to be an option to generate a packet. And also, as mentioned before, there's also a workflow action if you wanted to have this incorporated at the critical point within any workflow process that you have or might want to configure going forward. There is a workflow action called Generate Document Packet, which will be enabled as soon as you're licensed for document packaging. And that workflow action effectively needs to call that template, that ad hoc function inside of workflow. It logically doesn't make any sense. You have to be pulling that template to say, go construct this packet for me and now present it potentially to the user before that's generated. So let's look at a little bit of a demonstration here. Just to set the stage, I am inside the Unity client. You can see that I've done a retrieval for an HR W4 document type. It's a wide open search, so I have a lot of different documents there. I've selected the W4 for Henry Radcliffe, and my right-click options, you can see everything that's normally there, generate packet as one of those items. Now, in a similar fashion, if I actually open that document, up in the ribbon bar, we have generate packet also. The exact same function will take place behind the scenes, regardless of which route that I choose to generate the packet. So when I click on generate that packet, depending upon how we're configured, I'm probably going to be displayed with a packet template selection window. And here, behind that W4, we've already configured that employee file packet. The W4 is one of those documents that can invoke that particular packet. But since I also have my solution configured to allow the ad hoc generation of packets, that's the reason why I see the none there. That would take me a little different route inside the system. So I can select the packet, click OK, and you can see what ultimately happens within the system is based upon that configuration of that packet template, it's now constructed everything relating to that packet for me. In this case, we said, hey, everything for Henry Radcliffe, based upon his employee ID, these specific document types that I want to have included. And you can see there's the list of the documents on the left side. I'll talk through a bunch of that in a few moments here. And on the right side, we actually see a thumbnail of what that document is going to look like as it's included as part of that packet. Again, regardless of the source file format, the cover letter probably was an image. I can see that. If I move down to my employment application, well, that was a Unity form. Unity forms can be rendered as part of this also. So again, that's what a view might look like before we actually generate this packet. This is all preview type of information. Here's the offer letter. Now, given that offer letter is a Microsoft Word document, it's not rendering as a Word document here. It's effectively giving us what it's going to look like as part of that PDF document. And you can see the thumbnails again over on the right-hand side. If you can't make out enough information regarding that thumbnail, you can hover over any one of those items and you can see that it expands that particular view for that thumbnail. Or if I choose, hey, I want to reorder the pages inside of this document as they're generated, I can simply drag and drop those pages around. So I've just moved page 2 in front of page 1. Notice there's different checkboxes within those thumbnails also. If I wanted to go ahead and exclude a particular page from that document, I just deselect that thumbnail. Here, all that we would get would be effectively that first page of that offer letter when we generate this packet. Now coming back into the left-hand side, notice I've selected the resume, but again, there's check marks there. That allows me to now exclude specific documents. The entire resume now is not going to be included as part of that. So you can see the interactivity here that I can go ahead and move things around and deselect different items. Or for example, if I wanted to take that I-9 form and make that higher up in the packet rather than towards the end, I can simply drag and drop that item and leave it wherever I want that to actually appear. So that's now going to be effectively the second page and forward of this particular document. So hopefully you get the idea here how you can go ahead and modify things, but based upon that template, that's what was brought back. Again, I've excluded the resume, I've deleted that page from the offer letter, I've moved the I-9 form here, but if I also want to now add additional documents to this template, I'm sorry, not to the template, to the packet that's been created, I can click on this Add Documents button. And that's going to invoke, based upon the configuration of this template, a custom query. Here we have an employee document search that's been populated. I can now search for any additional employees here, get a hit list, and recall I started here by invoking this off of the W4, but the template was configured not to include the W4. So I've selected the W4 for Henry Radcliffe here, and all that I need to do here is then click on Add to the Packet. When I do that, that adds the W4 now to my packet. It's going to put it at the end. Obviously, I can move that around just like anything else that I've done so far within this little demonstration. Now we get to a couple more things. Keywords. These keywords effectively are going to be related to the resultant packet document. Again, the template's been configured to automatically say, hey, consider this to be an HR employee packet. That's the document type that we see on the right. And I've inherited the keywords from the original source document when I first said generate this packet from the W4. So those are populated for me. So there's some different options for how that can potentially appear. Now we ultimately get to the point of saying, let's generate that packet. Given that right icon, the packet preview, I'm not going to show that here, but that effectively just gives you the visual of what that packet's going to look like before we would actually generate that packet. But when I click on generate the packet, that's going to go through and now put together all the different items, normalize everything as a PDF, and this may take some time depending upon how large of a packet that you have. If we're only talking about a dozen pages or so, that's going to be, just a few seconds. If we're talking about a 200-page packet, that's going to take a little bit more time, hence the reason why you have a progress bar here. But ultimately, once that packet is created, that can be automatically displayed for the user. So here's the table of contents. By the way, since we're rendering this as a PDF, everything's going to be bookmarked inside of the PDF for me, so that when I go to my 7th page here, you can see I've enabled now my PDF bookmarks here that I can very quickly and easily navigate to that particular page. But the last piece here is you can see that this is still OnBase. We've already archived this document inside of OnBase, and now I can actually view the keywords and the document type that's associated with, again, everything that was inherited previously. All right, that was a little bit of a whirlwind tour, but hopefully that gives you an understanding of how this ultimately works. And that was for a templated packet. But how are things different from using that non-template option? What's happening is the users then ad hoc making a determination what documents that they want to include within the packet. And it's really a similar process to the templated process that I just demonstrated, with a few exceptions. The document that we invoked the generate packet from is going to be included inside of that particular packet. Because again, there's no template. We have to start with something, and it's going to go ahead and just take that source document and include it within the packet. The user then has the ability to add those documents like we saw within the template, but that's going to be document retrieval. Because again, you could do this across to any document type, assuming that you have appropriate permissions. You now just use native document retrieval. And then after we've selected all those documents, made all those modifications, when we generate that packet, the user is going to have to index that resultant document. Again, there's no template. We don't know what document type that we want to index this to, and hence we don't know what the keywords are associated with that particular document type. So let's just demonstrate this now. Here, I'm just starting a different place. I'm doing an accounts payable document search for Tappet buttons. And you can see I get a hit list on any one of these documents. Again, assuming that I have permissions, I select the AP checks. I say, let's generate my packet here. And that effectively is going to take that AP check document and include it within the packet. Given, as I mentioned before, configuration for those non-templated packets is to include a table of contents. So that's going to be dynamically created after we've actually settled on all the different documents that go in here. But when I say add my documents, that's now going to bring up native document retrieval. I can perform a search from a hit list. I can select as many items as I want using standard Windows conventions. So I have these 5 documents. I can then say add this to a packet, so this would probably be a little bit more analogous to a financial audit use case. I add that to the packet. Now I have all of those documents being included. Again, I can modify this in any form or fashion that I wish, and simply I just come in here and say, let's go ahead and generate that particular packet. Since again, this is not a template, this is where I would be prompted to say, okay, great, I'm going to generate this. Where do you want this document to go to, the rendered PDF? And I'd have to select the appropriate document type and enter my keywords. All right, so that's your whirlwind tour of document packaging. So how do you get it? Officially, the product is called Document Packaging and Delivery. And rather than being a flat fee for the cost of this module, like we're so used to for a lot of OnBase modules, this is actually a volume-based license model. It's based upon how many packets that you're going to be creating over a calendar year. So hence this is a little difficult for me to state how much is this going to cost. You have to start thinking about your use cases and how heavily this is actually going to be utilized. So contact your Naviant account executive if this is something that's of interest to you. You know, probably be prepared to talk about those volumes and your use cases so we can make the appropriate recommendation, because obviously there may be some additional services to help you configure how this is actually going to be kicked off, especially if we're talking about invoking this through workflow. There is some related licensing. We talked about invoking this through workflow, so I wanted to remind you, you would actually have to have workflow licensing to be able to use that function inside of workflow. Remember that cover letter was being generated via document composition. We talked about being able to invoke this from a line of business application using application enabler. And also think about now the distribution. It's great we've created this, and we really haven't talked about this so far. We have that document created, it's stored inside of OnBase, but somehow we have to distribute that. Obviously you can use email, but depending upon the file size and security concerns, that might not be the greatest way of doing it. So ShareBase is another consideration, and that's an enterprise file sync and share solution that Highland has, that you could drop that document into a ShareBase folder and now share a link to that folder to any recipient in the world so that they can download or even just inline view that particular document. There's always more information available on any of these topics that we present. So I just wanted to highlight on community.highland.com, there's a product page for document packaging. I strongly urge you to go check that out if this is something that you wanted to learn more about, as well as checking out training.highland.com. There is a premium subscription course as well as a hands-on lab specific to document packaging that you may very well find some value in as you take a look at this further.